And that's what that big battle in Texas is all about over what's going to go into those socialist textbooks down there in the public schools. The liberal statists are fighting the conservative statists, and they're saying, we want our form of statism in these books. Because the average American, you ask him, what causes inflation? He will say, well, golly, grocery stores are causing the inflation. They're raising their prices over there. Or the service stations are raising their prices every day. It's that greed, that's what's causing the inflation. We need some price controls on those people. You see? But you see, the Chinese communists know better because they got a central bank too. And what they have told the federal government, the U.S. government, is don't even think about cranking up your Federal Reserve printing presses, which they're doing, to pay off this debt. In other words, to default on it, which they've done decade after decade. That's what's funded this machine, the income tax and the Federal Reserve. There's a reason why Americans no longer walk around with silver dimes and silver quarters and silver half dollars. It's because they've debased the currency year after year. And the Chinese communists are saying, don't even think about it. We have loaned you dollars and we expect to be paid back in full-fledged, full force, full value dollars. And if they demand that, you can be darn sure the other creditors are going to demand it. There is a collision coming on the horizon. And my hunch is that the American people are going to rue the day when they permitted these imperial enterprises, Iraq, Afghanistan, and so forth, and permitted the government officials to borrow the money to fund those things from the Chinese communists. But this is a threat we face. It is a threat to our economic liberty, to our financial well-being, to our economic well-being. That's the welfare state. In the middle of this perfect storm of the welfare state and the warfare state, you've got their favorite statist government program, the one that's gone on for 30, 35 years, the drug war, in which they have brought nothing but death and destruction to masses of people, destroyed lives with this war. And you know what it's all about? It's all about money and power. There's lots of people making money off this thing. There's judges on the take. There's prosecutors on the take. There's law enforcement agents on the take. You got CIA agents running drugs. You've got asset forfeitures in which they're stopping cars on the highway driven by poor people with cash, and they're just stealing the cash. It's a classic case of highway robbery. They're saying if you don't like it, sue us, knowing that the poor don't have the money to hire a lawyer, especially after they've had their cash taken from them. This is the biggest money maker for them, and that's why they fund it, because they got no other rationale for it. 30 years ago, they could argue, we're going to stamp out drugs from society, and yet everybody knows they're not going to do that. Everybody knows that by now. It's ridiculous. But it is deadly and destructive. You've got the conservative statists saying they're chomping at the bits to send the military down to the southwest. Do exactly what the Mexican military is doing along the border. Barging down people's homes, haranguing people, arresting people, killing people, and of course, waging war on guns. You've got the liberal statists saying, person doesn't own his own body. We're going to punish him for ingesting these substances that he chooses to ingest. So you got all of this, these three wars. And embedded in these three wars is the concept of individual responsibility. Because you see, a statist hates that concept. Conservatives will preach it. They go back to Ronald Reagan's old General Electric speeches. And with freedom comes responsibility. And they always had these cute little freedom mantras that they got back in the 50s. But when you hold up individual responsibility to a conservative statist or a liberal statist, it's like holding up a cross to a vampire. It's like, don't do it. Look at 9/11. Who do they blame for 9/11? They don't take responsibility for what their foreign policy produced. That's the last thing they're going to do. You see, it's all freedom's fault. You see, they blame it all on freedom. The terrorists hate us for our freedom, which is maybe why they're taking away our freedom, so the terrorists won't hate us anymore. Well, let me tell you what happened here. When the Berlin Wall came crashing down, the Soviet Empire dismantled. The military and the military-industrial complex and the conservatives that love big government and foreign affairs, they started freaking out big time. People were asking, hey, what do we need a big Cold War military machine for? Cold War's over. What do we need NATO for? What do we need all these overseas bases for? Maybe it's time to start dismantling this, at least significantly reducing it, lowering taxes. They freaked out. They're entitled to their ever-increasing military budgets. It was their right to keep these things. They said, oh, we'll fight the drug war, and they send military down into Colombia. And they said, and we'll be the world's global cop. And the first thing they do, they turn on their old buddy, their old friend, their old ally, Saddam Hussein. Now that always shocks Americans. You mean the U.S. government was partners with Saddam Hussein? They called him a Hitler. Well, duh, yeah. They were partners with the guy they called Hitler. You see, when they invaded Iraq, you remember all the big scares in the beginning, WMDs. Oh my gosh, the WMDs are going to be fired on us. And the statist legs were quaking and Saddam was going to come and get them, just like the terrorists and the communists and so forth. Well, the UN inspectors kept saying, there's no WMDs. He's destroyed them. And the conservatives were making fun of them. Oh, Inspector Clouseau, the UN inspectors they're incompetent. You need the CIA and the military. And Saddam said, bring in the CIA. They can search anywhere they want. No, we need the troops. The troops are expert searchers. And, well, of course, we all know that there were no WMDs. But why were they so certain? Why were U.S. officials so certain that they were going to find these WMDs? Well, let me tell you why. They had the receipts. They were the ones that had delivered them to him, including poisonous gas, the U.S. as well as other Western countries, when he was part of their team. And why did they deliver him those WMDs? So that he could use the poisonous gas to kill Iranians. Now, why did the U.S. government want to kill Iranians? Well, because the Iranian people had the audacity 11 years before, to oust the U.S. installed dictator of Iran, the Shah of Iran, who had spent 25 years torturing Iranian dissidents with the full support of the CIA. Which isn't surprising because it was the CIA that put the Shah into power 25 years before that in 1953, ousting the democratically elected prime minister of Iran in this CIA coup, a man named Mohammad Mossadegh, who had been Time Magazine's Man of the Year. They installed the Shah, utilizing the torture techniques that they had just learned in the Korean War. They supported the Shah in maintaining order in Iran for 25 years until the Iranian people finally ousted them. A lot of Americans didn't know about this, but the Iranian people sure knew about it. And that's why they took those hostages from the U.S. Embassy. They were saying, oh, it's about freedom. The Iranians hate us for our freedom. The Iranians were angry over what this government had done.